if you will allow me to make you a autopsy cadaver studio in, I was a young man back then, that was 1992 or 3, and I had just landed this record contract, which was a miracle to me. The story behind that is very interesting. I was there to write sign in New York City at Shawnee, G. Shermer, which music sales owned Shawnee, had purchased Shawnee Press. Fred Waring had passed, and they wanted somebody to be the road guy for choral music, and because Lou Kirby, the guy who was the director, his wife had cancer. So they had seen me yuck with people and do some reading sessions and things, and they said, oh, this could be, and we're publishing him now, so this could be a big thing. So they were going to sign me to a writer's contract and an employment contract. And as I was walking out of the office, I don't know how I didn't even think about telling them the things that I do, but Horowitz's piano is in their office, G. Sherman. And there's a little plaque on it as you walk in. I said, you mind if I play that piano? I'd just like to say I've done it. And they said, well, no, of course not. That's why it's here, for people to view and to special people to play. And so I said that, and I played a piece. And at the end, I didn't think anything about it, I just played, like I did for service the other day. And at the end of the thing, the guy asked me to come back into his office. And they literally put a record contract in front of my face right after that. They said, we didn't even know you played the piano. So they gave me a contract for my first album. And it was American Tapestry, and this is where it was. And then I did it in a little Pennsylvania studio, and Simple Gifts I did at the end of the second day. And I know that because if you listen to the album, the first part of the recording I did right towards the end, for whatever reason, one of the highest notes, and you probably won't be telling us I tell you this, went slightly out of tune. And I wanted to go back and redo that passage, just the place where it's right in that section right there. One of those, and after you listen to it, it almost sounded a little. We got to where we liked the slight out of tune. It almost sounded like a old piano. For that one little moment, it's kind of like a little music box. And so we left it in. So when you listen to that now, you'll hear that one little note just sounds a little watery, and it gives it that kind of arcade. So anyway, you brought back some memories, not because you played out of tune, but because you played that song, and very much in the way that I enjoy it. And my vision for the piece was to create this kind of rustic spinning wheel effect and capture kind of this Amish sort of imagery, the music box, and there's some of those kinds of things. And of course, there's a nod or two to Copeland in the arrangement and all of that. I liked so much of what you did. You adjusted some tempos in the harder places, and I want to say, yes, that's the way to do that. If you get to a passage like that, you can sell it at a slower tempo. Do it. Who cares? I'm not sitting there, and I don't care. I'm telling you, giving you permission to do it. When you get, instead of fumbling with some of those big, okay, I can play this section down, when I get to it, I can't stay in that same tempo. Well, let me show you what she did was just the exact right answer, because we have this. But see, that would have been the typical. What she did, it was so clever. Insane tempo and to make it beautiful. And you made it beautiful when you sold the music, which I want to just to say that's an option. We'll get to any arrangement, Mark Hayes or whatever. Just do a big retard and say, I am establishing a new tempo. and it really works. I heard a guy who's teaching, there's snobs everywhere, but he was teaching every valley from Hamilton's side. Every valley shall be exalted. And the kid had a great voice, but he couldn't carry all the melismas over and over and over. And he said, you know, you can breathe anywhere and everywhere if you need to, as long as you sell the breath. It's an emotional thing, an emotional part of the piece. And he went, so he said, shall be exalted. And he's showing every time, he just, like he was being, and nobody cared. And that teacher showed him where he could breathe, a lot of different places. But by musically approaching it, making it part of the drama, even a wrong breath and the wrong phrase actually was working. So that's the way to solve the problem. You did right, and that's a great, great thing. I do want to talk about a few things that can enhance the sound that you get, because the balance, the piano is such a glorious instrument. I fell in love with it when I first heard the notes of a grand piano. Just the simple notes. And there's a few places where that ping, that precious ping that we long for in the instrument, could have been a little more defined. Like at the beginning. Let's start at the beginning. There's three layers going on here. There's the spinning wheel. Then there's a finger pedal in the music. I wish you had a book I could show to you, where there's this little hidden alto voice that is on the offbeats. And so it's supposed to emerge from the pedal kind of in an interesting way. Just show them that. It's like right at the beginning. And so it's always on the offbeat. And it's, so you've got really this 3 or 4 layers going on. And eventually that kind of goes into the background, that little into this overall murmur. But then when the right hand comes in, I would love for you to lean more weight into the top half of the right, you know, that melody, and even almost like you're plucking a dulcimer. Okay, stop right there, stand up, and let me show you how much difference. I'm wanting it to sound like a rustic instrument. And I want it to sound like more than one instrument, because I didn't really write it to be performed in public, even though it is often performed in public. But I wanted it to, when you're listening to the album, to get this feeling like there's a dulcimer in the background, and here comes this little plucked guitar at the top. And so by approaching those completely different and putting more weight and more, a different kind of dexterous approach to it, you get that pingy sound. Okay, now let's stop right there. Let's talk about something else. Did you hear the difference? Yes. Did you hear that? Yes. I did too. And it's more magical. There's a magic that happens when you hear that. And you can close your eyes and hear the layers. That's what we're going for. As pianists, if we can create layers of sound, it's a more pleasing sonic experience for the listener. We are, as church pianists, always playing hymnody, very vertical playing. This is part of, and I understand why. I mean, it's their job. But we have to make sure that in our private playing that we don't just become vertical pianists. That we always are thinking linearly, vocally, and that leads me to my next point. I had a teacher who said, sing with your fingers. Sing with your fingers. And she used sacred music and popular music in some cases. Of course, her popular music was from the 40s. But the idea of musical scansion was always at the heart of her pedagogy. Musical scansion has to do with, Mendelssohn had to write a song without words, but the implication of words is always there. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. The way of the hand has to figure out how the voice and the words create the proper scansion in the language of the accented syllable on G, and then Zos opens up. Jesus. Now, how does the hand create that effect without the name Jesus? It's different for every hand, but you lean the weight into one, you pull the weight out of the other. But every phrase, and that's an obvious example because it's so obviously a two-note slur, and of course that's a very popular gesture in all classical music, and it's everywhere, these sighing motives. But in every phrase, there are these decisions to make. Where is my landing place on this melody? What are notes of passing and transition? And which are principal notes that are lengthening moments for us as interpreters? I call it choreography, tonal choreography, to choreograph your piece. And connecting the dots between the phrases of the music and how that interacts with the way your hand does. We tend to approach things at making the hand tell the interpretation what to do. I don't do that very well, so my hand tells me I have to do it this way. But we have to reverse that. We have to think first so that the hand becomes obedient to us as good interpreters, as conscious, creative, that's the word. Creativity is an active, conscious will. It's not a random thing that your hand makes you do because my fourth finger stings. You see, I can't allow the fourth finger to tell me that. So it requires a lot of consideration. For instance, the first two notes, da da ta, da da ta, da 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 da, always passing around and swirling around the eighth notes as they climb to the longer note, the scansion. There's a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift. That's where we usually, as a singer, would go. So now, let's go back, get that wonderful sound you're getting, and a little slower tempo, and let's see if you're swirling without accents in wrong places. So let's try it now. The reason I want you to slow down, that little phrase backs away. Little ballerina dancing in the forest right there. That's beautiful. And so you have that in you. Because we're so scared of the physicalness of a piece of music, we let the physical tell us in moments of high stress. And really, the way to relieve stress is to be the ballerina in the forest. Whatever the image is. But that was absolutely transcendent. Right there, I was off, somewhere. And I wasn't even aware of the technique going on. So I think as we plan our playing, we need to go back and reconnect with our inner vocal mechanism to find this mystical connection between making your hands do what your mouth tells you is right, because it's much more sophisticated. Our mouth creates all types of intricacies and subtleties and consonances and vowels and extends things and timing and so on. The fingers are big clubby things. They're not really that sensitive. So the voice can teach the fingers. How many of you are teachers? Listen, there's a school of thought that says you should never sing with your students because that might cover up things. And I understand that, but let me tell you, the voice is the first instrument of discovery for the human being. It is. It is the instrument of discovery. So the more developed the voice is, the more the hands can be an extension of the voice, you see. So if you want cantabile play, bel canto play, beautiful melodic contouring and Rubinstein-like tone and all of that, it's all going to be related. When we like Yo-Yo Ma, it's because he sounds like a human voice. Yeah? And so remember that. And I don't mean that you have to sing in some student's ear like this so that they can't hear what they're doing, because singing it's like a pedal. you can pedal through your misery, you know, and, well, I don't want to listen to myself, so I'll push the pedal down, you know, and it does kind of act like, it's a little bit like my wife says, you know, make up in the morning, you know, it makes the bag go away, and she calls it spackle. And so, Little Mermaid spackle. So the pedal's like makeup, you know, it kind of covers up the blemishes, but we have to be very, very careful when we do that, so that we're not participating in a gradual degradation of our playing. So that was the right idea right there, finding the swirl and finding the meaning in the phrase. All right, let's move on a little bit. There was a moment where I suspend all the activity, and I go to a place where the piano itself in its purest, and what I think is the sweetest range of the piano takes place. And I wanted you to enjoy it more. First of all, let me say that you play your counter melodies in the alto voice extremely well. What voice part do you sing?
I sing, well, second soprano.
So it's an inner voice. So you seem to have an innate ability. For instance, here, I thought that was as best as I've ever heard it played by somebody other than myself. I'm awesome. But you did, and this was very subtle, but then play that for me again. I think you just played that beautifully. You found that alto. See, there's bravo. It says on tempo, the composer's a liar. Take more time there. Let it breathe. Yeah, that's what it means. I just don't know what I meant by that. You obeyed. We all both went down together there because it needs more breathing. And those minor chords. I often find the place where a song needs to breathe, and it's just an observation after playing it and writing thousands of songs, is when something moves from major to minor, it just seems like that's a moment of reflection in the piano. And it's kind of like, hello, wake up. This is a place you can do something with the tempo of it. So out of all that kind of murmuring stuff that you did to perfection, I wanted the release of that and these purer sounds, these unadorned moments. Yeah, have a little more breathing room. And also, by doing that, you kind of set this, particularly here. I thought this one, maybe this is where I'm thinking. Yeah, I think I'm thinking of this place right here. Start right here. You know what I mean when I say the decay of the room? Okay, listen out here.
Okay, you played that kind of echo.
Can I hear how loud that note is? Play the second of that. Rather than, what you're doing is you're feeling your finger. You're doing exactly the same, which you would think would be the right answer. But it isn't. The right answer is listening to the decay in the room and then saying, how hand are you going to play where that note vibrating out here is? And if you can do that, it's magic. It's magic. It's just a funny thing. And you know what? It doesn't matter when you play the note. The timing doesn't matter. You play it, whenever you play it, it just matches the decay. If you wait longer, that note got to be softer. So it can be different every time. It can be organic. It changes all the time. So try it one more time. Just play that number. Well, better, better. I still think it could be softer, slower. These moments where the notes ring in the room. This is a place where people, you get that funny little silence in the audience, where people go, I don't know if I should agree with this boy. They hold on to their shirts, because they don't want to rattle, because somehow or other, there's something in the room. You see, and we have to fight all the time at the end of just being activity. Little oral activity that just kind of buzzes around. And that works at some point. You need to entertain the ear some. But then there's those transcendent moments when you play chords and you just show them stacks of sound. And you mix them together like a painter mixes their colors on a watercolor kind of thing, and you mix them and melt them, and you're controlling the sound. Don't let your fingers control your playing. Let your creativity, your listening, tell your hands to behave themselves. And you know what? Your hands will respond. We have to reverse that way of playing. And I didn't know it as a composer, too. I'm telling you my journey here, and maybe you'll have a parallel. I had a guy who taught me solfege. And before that, I had to have a piano to compose. And the piano, my hand went to melodies. Oh, if I want to reset just as I am, I go, okay. Does as I am without me. It feels really good to do this. And I could feel the patterns, and I could learn to do sequences and things because my hand enjoyed the swirling about on the keys. But this guy came in and taught me solfege. And I started I had to put my hands in my pocket, and not wiggle my fingers to make the melody. I had to hear it in my head and go, just as I am without me, but that love was shed. Or maybe, just as I am without one plea, and I find the notes that seem to please. Then I go up and begin to see swirls instead of having to make my hands do it. And like Hindeman said, never write an instrument like a piece while playing that instrument. You should hear it and then learn how to make the instrument do it. That's the compositional process. So he taught me solfege, he taught me kodai, and I can hear melodies and see the melodies. I can sit on an airplane and listen to them. Now the difference is you have to hear you have to have a vision for what you want it to sound like first. And if you've heard it in another person, you have the capabilities of doing it. If you've heard enough, I love what he's doing. There's a way of doing it. There is a way of doing it. But if you expect your hand to teach you that, it's not going to happen that way. Mm-hmm. Your ear has to be the absolute instructor away from your instructor. Because your hand will lie to you. Your hand will lie to you. Your scales are lying to you in a few places. Although I must say your contrary scale was as good as I've ever heard. That was a beautiful thing. But there were other scales where your thumb bumped a little bit as you crossed under it. So you've got some technical things working against it. So I don't know exactly how to work with that, but maybe the idea of passing your thumb under the hand a little more gently. I saw you cranking your elbow a little bit to achieve that. I don't think it's necessary. I saw you other times not have to do that. So there's a few of those scales that are kind of awkward. If you have to rewrite it. But I think it was this one. I kind of look over here. I can see your hand going up like that. And I'm getting the bumps. I should think of cello. Oh, that's already better. That's already better. Just like, yeah, that's it. Just like you're playing this cello. If you can see that in your playing, you're going to hear a bump because that's just the way you play. Okay, so that one right there wasn't too hot. Yeah. And here's a thing that Brant Adams taught me. Brant Adams is my orchestrator. And this is a completely compositional thing. But he said when you write, you want a string, you're writing a string sweep, which is what I'm imitating there. He says, you know, every time you do this, Joe, and he's been doing my stuff for 20 years, he says, you go, da 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 da. He says, you know what really is exciting is you go, dum, and it accelerates, you write in the acceleration. And so that's, I started going quarter, eighth note, triplet, 16 notes, you know, zooming up to the top. So you start at any scale, start slower at the bottom and speed to the top. All right? So try, and it's an illusion, but that gives that effect, you know, and that's kind of what that scale. Now Mozart, you want digga 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 if it's a passage word scale. But if it's imitating a harp bliss or thing. So let's try starting slower at the bottom of the scale and sweeping up. Yeah, let me show you. Oh, you're getting it. Yeah. See how the notes really do get faster there? So, and I'm going to change the pedal here. Yeah, when you are doing those little tweaky like that, don't be worried about every note. It's an effect, and it's just So don't be so handicapped by that. You know, make sure that you're just swirling sound. And folks, when you get to some of these effects like that, let the pedal build and be your friend during those kinds of it, because it's really not supposed to be every note. Or it's supposed to be a swoosh of sound. Now, here is the key though. When you have lots and lots of swooshes of sound building up in the pedal, you have to double your efforts to project the melody. Or else it gets louder, 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 louder. I can Good. That was it. Yeah.
I didn't concentrate so much.
And it was almost like your brain was in the right hand versus the material, the oboe, and the bassoon, the oboe, the clarinet, you know, as they kind of climbed up orchestra. So that's just, I don't know what that would be. That'd be a harp, just sort of, a little dulcimer kind of thing. Anybody else have any comment about this? It really was a very successful performance, I thought. Very, very nice indeed. All right, well, good, yeah. This was a very, very boring class without your bravery. Talk to me, ask me some questions, because we can talk about the piano and do some demonstration here. Yes?
This is the out of context, but we're talking about the voice being the instrument that you're emulating with your hand. And a lot of times in jazz, I know this is off the subject kind of, but in jazz it's really kind of the reverse. You're using, well, you know what I'm saying, you're using your voice to sound like an instrument.
Well, and that's absolutely true. The cantabile style of playing is not every style of playing.
Yeah.
In jazz, you are, and in Brahms, you're imitating an entire orchestra. And of course, orchestras have voices, and you know, you have to follow that whole thing to the end. But a lot of times you're imitating a timpani or you know, some other. You can obviously tell. Oh, that's a set of trumpets that he's writing in the piano part. And vocal jazz does imitate. You know, you know, the way a trombone, you know, the shakes and all of that. And when you play more contemporary music, whether it be with a praise band or with a jazz ensemble, the piano is 20th century treated more percussively. It's like a part of the percussion section. And that is different. That is different. But here's a thing that Chuck Moronic, who is a professor of jazz at Arizona State, I produced his, if you're interested in some beautiful jazz arrangements, they're very simple and they're so tasteful for worship. Chuck Moronic, Shawnee Press, one called Sanctuary Jazz, one called American Hymn Classics, and one called Piano L. And they're like 2 pages long, and they have all these wonderful voicings to the chords, you know, that it sounds like Vince Giraldi comes to church. And one thing that we were having a conversation, his church does a jazz coffee house. And somebody will get up, I mean, it's kind of funny, but they pack the place out, and people come, they have coffee, and they have scones and stuff like that, and they sit and listen to this jazz ensemble. And somebody will get up and read a psalm, or a verse of scripture, you know, whatsoever things are lovely, think on these things. And they will, and it's just a cool place to hang. And they do these extemporizations. So we were talking one night about jazz, because that's his deal, and it's not mine. But I'm learning. You know, I'm playing Claude Bowling, and I'm playing Peter Nero arrangements, and I'm learning, and Mark Hayes, and I'm learning how to do it. Mark, it wasn't his second skin either. He went to New York and studied it, you know, because it's something, if you're not born to it, it's a challenge to learn the theory of it. And Mark, I applaud him because his jazz music has become much more organic, you know. It's like his second skin now, it's great. But we talked about the voicing that most jazz piano players, there's 2 different types of jazzers who play very vertically, and they'll play the clash, the sounds that are, so, you know, as percussion. Or you have jazz players who can, like Keith Jarrett. Who feather in the dissonances. And that's a very, I mean, they're both valid. I mean, there's nothing wrong with either one of them. They're just going to get 2 different effects. One is going to be percussive and almost like a drum effect, you know, because the dissonances are all played equally. So you can even see it in the recording studio, you can see the difference in the types of sounds you're getting. One of them is very a wall, and sudden and very, you know, that has a big attack. And the others, you can tell that this note here went down at 47 velocity, this one went down at 32 velocity. And the way he had a system of which, when he did these colorful chords, that sometimes people say, this sounds like noise to me. The reason he doesn't sound like noise is because the note that is the most dissonant in the chord, the 7th, the 9th, the tritone, the notes that are closer and cause the most rub, those got feathered in. They were the lightest struck. So his hand could be playing 5 notes and all of them have a different volume based on their theoretical function in the chord. I looked at him and said, "You thinking about all that?" Wow. And the more you listen to it, you go, well, heck yeah, that's what he's doing. And then I realized I do that every time I play him. You put the pinky playing louder, you put the bass a little louder, and then the notes in the middle, they're a little less, you know, or unless they're moving, and then you bring that out a little bit. You know how we do that? And if you're playing for the choir, you follow that note, and then you follow. So we do it. It's just that we don't know. We never are conscious of, okay, that's 7th right there. If I play that too loud, that's going to sound yucky. But if I just barely play it, Were you in the session when I did set me as a seal?
Yes.
Okay. Did you, the last chord of the cadence, where the chords are going down, or it was something like that. I forget what the notes are. But there's a dissonant note in that chord. It's not, it's, well, that F sharp, which kind of gives it that shimmer, that has to be it's just barely there. If I played it, it begins to sound muddy and ugly, but if it's just barely in the chord, it's color, and it's has a different impact. So jazz is really a great field of study. So I've enjoyed touching the hem of the garment of the great jazz musicians. Peter, you were my favorite. He's my favorite.
What was the name of the man you said?
Chuck Moronic. It looks like moronic.
M-O-R-O-N-I-C?
M-A-H. Yeah, M-A-H-R-O-N-I-C, I think. It's weird, but Shawnee Press. Go to Chuck and M-A-H or M-A-R.
I got that Christmas one, and I played those, and people in the Lutheran church go, what? I guess, but they don't object to those.
They're very tasteful.
Very well done. They're wonderful.
Very tasteful.
And easy, I mean, easy to watch.
Yeah, I mean, they just have a very gentle spirit to them. And the minute you start playing them, like he does his doxology, that I wish I had it here, I just played for it. These chords, in a million years, I would have never thought of those chords. It's just off of my radar. But now, when I play them, I just went, these are so pleasing. And so, I wouldn't do it every Sunday, but to do one that way, and it seems like Christmas too, you can get away with a lot of different things that maybe you wouldn't do on Communion Sunday,
Yeah, we do Mark Hayes' Go Tell It with her on the flute, me on the piano. And the congregation has begun to expect it now.
That little touch of jazz is a sweet
It's a
sound.
nice, easy, I mean, it's kind of body in the middle, but it's.
It's like the worship service today, I mean, we had so many varieties of music in it.
I know, I'm guilty of doing that here. I just want to throw, let us have 1 week where we don't argue about what music God likes. I get so weary of that argument. And it's very clear in Scripture what God likes. It is. I mean, there's no getting around it. It says, encourage one another with hymns, psalms, and spiritual songs, and give thanks to God in your heart. Doesn't say anything about even singing. And the New Testament says, give thanks to God in your heart. I didn't write it. It's in the Bible. So it's talking about all the styles being used to help us talk to each other, and all that. I just think that argument is so weird. It's like reading about politics on Facebook. Oh, no.
Yes.
I know that you feel that way. You felt that way for 2 years, please. And of course they probably would feel the same way if I told them what I thought. It's just an unanswerable argument. So it sucks our life away. And really, I'm not in competition with Rollo Dilworth or Mark Hayes. I'm in cooperation with these guys. The voice of praise needs diversity as a survival technique. I mean, the survival of the species is all about diversity. That's what we're taught in biology class. Nature chapter 1 diversifies in order to survive. And we think that we can survive if everybody goose steps the same way. And as much as you think I sit there when I write my piece and go, oh, I think I'll write like Rollo now so that I can be like him. And he thinks of me, no, you give it, you believe in everything, you believe in it to the max. But when we get into a room together, we say, isn't it great that God's working with you the way you are, and he's personal to you, and he's personal to you, and he's personal to Rollo, and he's personal to me. I don't, you know what, it just took a weight off of my shoulders that I don't have to be as good as this person over here, or as the same like this person. I'm just going to be Joe, and if it's successful, great. If it's not, I was true to what I felt God was working with my music. I just don't like this and our churches are the same way. You know, I don't believe what you believe. I guarantee you I don't. Because you don't know what I believe, do you? You know some of the things I do. But we don't, if we sat down, eventually, guess what? Which something in your experience would not match up with my experience. You know, I'd be against something that you think I shouldn't be against because you have some information I need. And I would be saying, well, I got information you need. So, okay, we got a wall there. Let's just stop having a relationship right there because we're not twins. I heard a quote, a man does not have to be your twin brother before he's your brother. And it's freeing. It's freeing as a musician, particularly because we constantly stand in front of the mirror and go, I stink. Look at me. Musically, I stink. Beethoven, look at Beethoven. So bad. It paralyzes us. It paralyzes us. But you know what? Beethoven needs us, and Chopin can't do it without us. Now, why can't we look at it that way?
That's awesome.
Do you play classical music anymore?
I do. For my own amusement. But, you know, I'm learning the Beethoven choral fantasy, and once a day I go to the piano and I work my waltzes and my Debussy.
Do you ever play Liszt?
Yes, I do. I have little tiny hands. I mean, they used to be long, but I wore them down. But Liszt sometimes challenges my reach.
Yes.
But I tell you, if you're not familiar with these pieces, the Paganini variations are beautiful. Anyway, I'm working on them right now. They're really kind of revealing themselves to me as being very valuable. Little pieces of transcriptions from Paganini violin things I really like. Yes, I love this. And he did a lot of song transcriptions, which was interesting. Liszt was a missionary for music because you realize in those days they didn't have recordings. So he wanted people to know the great melodies of the opera world and things of that nature. And so he broke from doing absolute music and he would go and do transcriptions of these great tunes. And he would play them in his concerts, and that's the way he would spread the sounds of these great tuneful melodies. I think that's quite admirable when you think about it. And of course, he had his own flair. He was kind of the first Liberace in that regard. They said that when we were doing one of my journeys over in Italy, we were sitting in a restaurant where Rossini always went after. There's the opera house there in Florence, and Rossini would go after the concert and eat this restaurant. In fact, they have the dish that he ordered every night, and that you could just go in and I want to sit at Rossini's table and I want to eat that dish, you know, and they'll bring you Rossini's dish and you'll look like Rossini after a while. But they said that one night it was the Anvil chorus, Verdi's for the Traviata. You know, da, 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 and you know, they made them encore it so many times, and that people came out of the opera house singing the melody. And the musicians playing in the little restaurants ready to receive the people, the post-opera thing, started playing the thing, and by the end of the night, the entire city was singing that melody. That blows my mind that the culture would be so connected to each other and out, and the windows had to be open, and they would hear this great melody. Wouldn't you love to go back in a time machine and be there the night that La Traviata was in, and that those people pouring out in the streets and that melody slowly coming down and people discovering it, and Rossini eating his pasta going, very rats. I just love stuff like that. We were so isolated from each other, which is why I like this conference, because we get to sit and talk about stuff like this, and then we go back and...
But their culture was accepting too, which is different. I mean, right? Really
Yes.
open and accepting of that kind of music and wanting it, and it just breathed part of their life, and I mean, just so into them.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
It's just average people. I mean, it was just so.
We have so many walls
Yeah.
that tells, you know, I thought that this great digital revolution generation might bring a lot of those walls down. And I think it has with young people to some degree. I mean, I'm very impressed with what my kids have on their iPods. You know, I'm amazed at it. And as it grows, I mean, Aubrey's favorite channel on the Sirius, I love my the radio, satellite radio. I have satellite radio. Oh, I just love it. But her favorite channel is Sinatra, the Sinatra channel. And I said, well, why do you like Sinatra? She says, well, they have such beautiful voices, you know. And she says, and the songs, they tell a story. And it's true that modern music doesn't really tell a story. They have repeated phrases and things. And that was kind of missing. And when she found out, you know, that she could cry a little with this story, or they use them in a movie that the kids connect with, like her favorite, Ain't That a Kick in the Head, you know. Da, 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 ain't that a kick in the head? Dean Martin, you know, and they used it in National Lampoon Vacation. It was a Vegas Vacation, and when they walked into the casino, it said, da, 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 da. And so she heard that, and just now when she heard that's Frank Sinatra or Dean Martin, I never knew that. I thought that was written for this movie. Of course, that's an old movie now, you know. But it's funny how they fall in love with certain things because of another cultural usage of it. We see that at Shawnee Press. We own a piece called Song of the Theme. It's by John Tavener. It's a very cloistered, kind of difficult piece, a cappella in the Russian Orthodox style, which is a very conservative style of music with these parallel chords. It sounds like monks singing in a monastery, you know. And it's in one of our Chester catalogs. But be that as may, we averaged, it's a very eclectic piece, and so musical aficionados and choir directors at colleges would order maybe 200 or 300 copies a year. And it was part of this valuable Tavener catalog that we maintained. When Princess Di passed and was killed, they had her funeral at Westminster Abbey, and when they took her out, there was this song that was sung. Made angels sing, you know, the Shakespeare made angels sing to the heavens, or whatever the words are there. And it's that song of the Theme, and it's awesome. And as the doors opened up, it was triumphant, which is the Church of England style. You know, the funeral is not a sad funeral. It's it goes out, and the boys' choir singing that soaring soprano part, you know, and it's just like angels. Well, I want you to know, the next month we sold 55,000 copies. The next month after that, 27,000, 34,000, and it has not stopped since. It's abated to some degree, but that one cultural happening created that moment. The same thing happened with Carl Jenkins, a contemporary composer who is I work with my Carnegie Hall concerts a lot at DCINY. He wrote a piece called Adiamus, and it's an album where he invented this language. Yeah, you know something about Adiamus? Yeah, it's the Delta Airlines put it on their Muzak when you got onto a Delta Airlines flight, and you it's something, and he made up the language, and it's kind of primal, and it sounds, I don't know, it's a really cool sound. Sounds Avatar-ish, like very, very much like that. And it just went crazy. It just went crazy because how many people fly every day, and they heard that. And then when he would do it in concert, all of a sudden he was thinking of it on this level. The audience would be buzzed and just go crazy. Oh, that's that piece! It's weird. Anyway, we chased a rabbit around the room there, didn't we? Thank you for playing, and thank you guys for being interested in. If I do these classes again, I really would love for more people to come and play. I enjoy teaching. But I should have them prearranged. That way we'll have 5 slots and we'll fill them up. Because I love teaching. I love interaction with folks. So maybe we can do that next time. I love